And that one I feel is particularly smart from that Emma lady who decided to set this up. But I think the even smarter bit of it is how she basically just told women to start paying for sex, called it empowerment, said that there's gonna be consent at all times, and made sure that consent is being plastered everywhere. And women basically ate it up, and they were like, you know what?
The royal penis is clean, Your Highness.
Welcome to the Breaktime Podcast, where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is a man who likes his women the same exact way he likes his yogurt. He is also a man who may include jumping to conclusions to his cardio routine. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. And we've got a bunch of women and a bit of man talk. But at the end of the day, truth and accountability need to take center stage in all of this. Mainly because I feel like there's a lot of things that people might try to dress up and make it seem as though it's one thing, yet it's the other. And this episode has quite a bit of that. And I intend to at least try to pull the veil back and expose it for what it really is. What am I talking about? That you will find out as you listen to the episode. And should you like it, should you not like it, should you have a different form of feedback, or should you want to suggest a potential topic and or guest for the podcast, then the DMs are always open. The social media links are usually in the description below. And should getting to the social media via the description seem like a lot of work to you, then don't worry. All you have to do is just listen all the way till the end, because I usually mention the social media there. But all in all, I do thank you so much for listening, and I hope you listen all the way to the end. Now, with that said, I want to kick things off by talking about the idea of sex and how it's always been used as a way to make men feel like, that's all we're looking for, and apparently, like, that's always been like a guy thing. Like, men have always been looked at as the ones that want sex. They've always been looked at as the ones who have to initiate sex. But over the past couple of years, we've been seeing that changing a little bit. We've been seeing more and more women who are talking about being quote-unquote sex positive. And also, when you think about it, the Bumble app was actually created for a more sex positive person, or should I say woman, considering that its entire philosophy was based on the fact that women were supposed to make the first move. Now, of course, for anyone who's looked at the stats on that, they know how good or bad that actually is, but it hasn't stopped people from trying something of the sort and extending it to other areas where they feel that women would probably feel a little bit better if they had more control, aka consent. Enter the sex party for women. Now, there was a story that I found on IG from someone from the Time magazine who just so happened to go on a sex party cruise on the Mediterranean and give her thoughts on, what the experience was like and what it was all about. Now, I am going to let the clip play, then give my thoughts on it, because I do have some very interesting thoughts on this one. So, without further ado,
I went on a sex party cruise in the Med. Here's what I saw. Haven't heard of killing kittens, you sweet, sheltered dear. The business was founded by Emma Sale, once snapped with Kate Middleton, and it calls itself the ultimate female empowerment brand. Basically, sex parties focused on women. So imagine an orgy, but women have to make the first move. Killing kittens parties began in big London houses and estates in the country, becoming a £15 million business. Now it's moving into cruises. This one, from Barcelona to Monaco, Italy, and back again, is the inaugural journey. It's a sex cruise with 630 passengers, where cabins cost from £5,000 to £35,000, and it's sold out. Within an hour, there was nakedness. Topless women queued at the bar for all-you-can-drink moe. The youngest passenger is 24, and the oldest is 74. Daily activities are laid on, from beginner's lap dance classes to spanking fundamentals. Then there's the dungeon, which opens in the evening dressed with red lights and various pieces of equipment, while the playroom has 32 double beds. Consent rules here. There are multiple reminders on the app from KK staff and various signs on the boat. Overall, I disembarked feeling impressed by so many people being so honest about their proclivities, and who appeared to have such frank and communicative relationships with their partners and an openness to discussing sex. If it's your thing, this felt like a safe space to explore it.
that was a safe space. Okay. That one was interesting. It was a safe space to explore your proclivities in peace. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but low-key, this feels like it's got a little Epstein on it. Because, all that this woman has spoken about is a cruise and the parties and what was happening and what the rooms were like. But she did not, in any way, shape, or form, mention the men. She mentioned couples, but she did not, in any way, shape, or form, mention the men. Which is a little bit interesting. But, then again, maybe that's just me looking in the wrong direction. But, that aside, this was one of the more interesting things that I was hearing. Because I'm like, okay, first of all, whenever guys try to have something like this, usually if it's in a building, it is looked at as like a sex club or some, more shanty version of a strip club where you're allowed to fuck the stripper. Or it's looked at as like one of these secretive places that's looked down upon. So it kind of has to be very hidden and quiet. But for the women, in this particular case, it is so well packaged that it can be posted up publicly on social media by someone from the Times, and it'll still be looked at as not a negative thing. Do you know how wild that shit looks like? It's like, imagine the billionaire yacht parties that people used to frown upon so much that they were busy talking about how millionaires and billionaires usually take girls on the sea to fuck them there. And then, like, people look at it and they're like, oh my goodness, imagine all of these celebrities and what people were doing so that they could move up the ranks or, like, get certain opportunities using such things. And then, while all of that's the case, on this other side, there is an entire cruise where women are paying money, whether they are as young as 24 or as old as 74, and they can go and shag whoever it is that they want without even having to offer them anything in return. And let me even make things a little bit better. They've branded it in like one of the most egregious ways possible, but because they put a nice, very family friendly spin to it, now it seems like it's an empowering thing. Because when you think about it, killing kittens is like the nicest way of saying beat that pussy up. I don't know, maybe it's just me that's seeing it as that, but I'm looking at it and this is like one of the most straightforward ways of saying, oh yeah, so we have this service where we basically allow you to pay and then you'll be on a cruise and you can fuck just about anyone provided they give consent. Like the whole consent thing is probably the one shtick that they are using so that they can have a bunch of women hop on board. Maybe because the idea of saying that, it's open to both men and women might make it a little bit harder for women to get on there because they're like, oh, maybe these men won't have consent. Like, do you actually think of how wild it is that someone decides to put this up and invite a journalist who can actually come and do a story on you and you're that confident to go and speak about it like this? Like, don't get me wrong, like there's the advertising side to it, which I know she's definitely doing, but the boldness in saying it is what I find particularly wild. Because I'm looking at it and there's a way that this entire thing has been put up that's making me think that these guys decided to put this sex party on a cruise for a very particular reason. Because when you think about it, if I'm not wrong, and the people of the UK who are listening can probably tell me if I'm right or wrong, but prostitution is illegal. So in some way, shape or form, if the government was to know that you are having, this service, or you can call it sex as a service or SaaS, happening in someone's house or houses, and the government was aware of it, then they could probably have you guys shut down because it technically classifies as prostitution because you're paying so that you can access the service, which includes sex. Okay, so the best thing to do in this case is to take it off the mainland and put it on international waters, because I don't think there's anything that prohibits prostitution on international waters. At least that's as far as my thinking is going, because it means that you can go and you can fuck around and you can come back and be like, you know what, this was just a cruise ship that just so happened to be, having a party of sorts. And the fact that it's a cruise ship means that people are paying for their quote-unquote cruise, as opposed to them admitting that they're paying so that they can get on the cruise for the sake of the sex. And that one I feel is particularly smart from that Emma lady who decided to set this up. But I think the even smarter bit of it is how she basically just told women to start paying for sex, called it empowerment, said that there's gonna be consent at all times, and made sure that consent is being plastered everywhere. And women basically ate it up, and they were like, you know what, we need to pay for this shit. Because I tend to think out of the 630 people that are paying for such, probably a good 500 of them are women. Okay, you can argue that maybe the other 130 people could be the men, or you could argue that 100 people are men, and maybe the other 30 could be some people that have come with couples and shit. And then you see how that goes down, because I'm trying to think about the number of guys who'd have heard about such a thing and decide to sign up for it would be high. But she's trying to push this onto women, not to the men. So let's assume that there's 30 men that knew about this, and they were like, you know what? They didn't say that men can't sign up for it, so they just paid. So you have 630, 500 are women, and then 130 are men. If you think of the amount of shagging that will be happening there, it's quite a bit. But the more interesting bit is now how, when you look at a service like this, it's basically profiting off of the idea of empowerment for women through consent. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, but the whole female empowerment bit when it comes through sex, I've never really gotten onto it. But I guess if the packaging and the branding is done right, then there's definitely going to be people that are gonna sign on. Because at the end of the day, I don't think that it's 630 lesbians getting into that ship. There has to be a couple of people that are shag. And I'm assuming some of those employees are men whose specific job is to shag these women, regardless of whether they're 24 or 74. So, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but seeing something like this, it just makes me think that if there's one thing that a lot of women are either good at or super susceptible to, it's just the rebranding of something to make it sound good. Just the same way they're trying to rebrand prostitution and just paying for sex and, sexual proclivities as empowerment. Because I don't feel like this is empowering to anyone. Y'all are just doing the same exact shit that a lot of guys normally would do or normally used to do, and some still do, but you're trying to rebrand it so that you can make it sound more palatable for most people. But, then again, that's just me and I could be wrong, so I am going to leave it at that and move it on to our main topic of this episode. And for this one, I'm not gonna lie, this one just sounds like a bit of an annoyance, but I felt like I just had to do it for the sake of the guys. Because this is one of those instances where there's a guy that'll come out and he'll say some shit that is supposed to make it seem like he's standing with women. And what he does with that is he basically uses it to bash men for something that men may or may not have done. And in this case, it was a man who was busy talking about misogynistic tropes. And while I can't refute that some of what he was saying does actually relate to actual tropes that exist, I don't know if I'd call them misogynistic. Because from what I was hearing, it didn't seem like that was actually the case. Although, I could be wrong about that. But I do still want to get into my thoughts on it. So before I do that, I'm going to let the clip play, then I can get into the comments, then I can get into my thoughts on it so that I can break this down properly. So without further ado,
here's 5 misogynistic tropes that blame women for men's behaviors. Number 1, daddy issues. We blame women for the psychological damage incurred when men fail as fathers. Number 2, the nagging wife. We mock women for having to repeat themselves incessantly when men simply don't listen or refuse to do what they're asked. Number 3, the home wrecker. We blame women for breaking up families instead of the man who broke his marriage vows, and oftentimes she didn't even know he was married. Number 4, she slept her way to the top. Now, often this is just a way to discredit successful women, but even if there's some truth to it, why don't we blame the man who abused his power? And number 5, the single mom. Now, some mothers might be single for unavoidable reasons, but why do we blame them instead of the men who abandon their children? Now, whenever I talk about male accountability, men in my comments love to be like, well, women need to be held accountable too. But women have been held accountable for generations, not just for themselves, but also for men. So maybe it's time men started pulling their weight.
Okay. So he says that those are misogynistic tropes, and he says that it basically covers for a lacking or a bad behavior that is perpetrated by a man or by men in general. But apparently these are tropes that we throw onto women. I don't know. This one seems particularly interesting. Not in a good way, just mostly because I feel like he's throwing a lot of blame in the wrong direction. But before I can get into any of that, before I can go all the way in on that one, let me get to some of the comments. So the first comment I found said, and I quote, "Let's not assume most single moms are abandoned. Most divorce is initiated by women, with majority of single parent households being led by women. Women leave men, yet the rhetoric is she, the mother, wasn't wanted." End quote. Okay, so in this case, I feel like this is someone who is speaking up for men, and I do think that there is quite a bit of, reality in that. Statistically, yes, you will say that women leave men way more than men leave women, I guess in some parts of the world as opposed to others. I can't say that that's the case for Kenya all the time, but I could be wrong on that one. But when you look at it, yes, there are situations where a lot of that divorce can be initiated by a woman. To be honest, I feel like the one that is the hardest to actually deliberate on is the single mom one, because there's a variety of factors involved. But so far, considering what this person said in the comments, I wouldn't say that they're wrong, but I also can't say that they're entirely right. Either way, let me move on to the next comment, which says, and I quote, "I agree with all of these. However, the one I will say is a single mom. I have strong feelings about this. If the mom and the dad are not on firm grounds and the male doesn't want the kid, then it isn't the man. Also, men should not pay child support for the children they did not want and the women wanted to keep." End quote. Now, to be quite honest, I do agree with what this guy is saying. Actually, no, I don't agree with what this guy is saying. I don't think those are misogynistic tropes. I do think that they are tropes to some degree, but I wouldn't say that they are misogynistic per se. Now, the last bit where he was busy talking about if the man didn't want the kid but the woman wanted the kid, he shouldn't pay child support, that one I am fully in agreement with. Not because men shouldn't support their children, but, sometimes you look at it and you realize that 100% of the decision to keep the kid or not keep the kid is on the woman, but the man has zero power in that, but also has zero power in whether he should or shouldn't pay child support, which I think is a little bit wild, especially for something that they made together, But then again, that's just me. So I will leave it at that and move it on to our last comment of this episode, where a woman said, and I quote, "Men will always say to pick better men while they're not actively trying to be better." End quote. Who said we're not actively trying to be better? Some of us men are actively trying to get better. So considering that there might be a few who aren't trying to get better, the whole idea of picking better men isn't necessarily us trying to tell you that, we are the better men. We're just saying that as far as selecting someone is concerned, you can definitely select someone that's better, even better than us, whoever the hell that us is. But it doesn't necessarily mean that if a lot of the guys around you aren't trying to be better, that you should select them. Like, at the end of the day, people talk about women being choosy. Be choosy. But anyways, with that said, let me leave it at that and get into my thoughts on this entire thing. Now, I don't know, maybe it's just me and I could be wrong about this, but I feel like this whole thing of the misogynistic tropes, first of all, isn't really misogynistic, and second of all, doesn't particularly blame the women. Maybe say for the home wrecker and the single mom. Like, those ones have like a bit of a category of their own, but for the most part, it's not like they really blame women. Second of all, I don't see anything misogynistic in a bunch of the stuff that's being said, except for maybe the single mom to some degree. Like, that one is the only one that I can say, okay, there might be some misogyny there depending on the situation, but the rest of the others don't really have misogyny in them. And therein lies one of the biggest problems that I find in a lot of the people that speak like this and use the term misogyny, especially when they're talking online. Oftentimes, it's not in relation with the actual meaning of misogyny, which is the hatred of women by either men or women, but it just relates to stuff that don't sound as nice or as kind to women, which, when you think about it, is basically like an extreme, almost delusional version of what reality actually is. Because it's like saying that my babe asked me to buy her something and then I said, no, I'm not gonna buy it for you. And then suddenly it's like, oh, so you hate me now. Like, that's exactly what the fuck it's starting to seem like. And to be quite honest, when you think about what's being said, it does actually sound a lot worse than what it actually is. And it's even way worse than that because it's a guy who's saying it. Because you'd expect a guy to at least have some understanding on why some of these quote-unquote tropes are there. But this guy is basically functioning by not paying attention to any of that and just going in and saying that these are misogynistic. And then, coming back to say that the issue is men not taking accountability because women have been taking accountability from the jump. And the truth of the matter is, if you've ever actually paid attention to history, you realize that men have been taking accountability for a lot of shit for a very long time. A lot of times, what you find is that a lot of these so-called tropes aren't even a matter of men, being misogynistic. A lot of this came from women, and I will get into them. Because when you look at either one of these ones, you realize that 3 of those examples aren't even used by men as much. They're mainly used by women. And for example, the nagging wife and the single mom, those ones are the ones that are mostly used by men, and even they aren't used unless it's absolutely necessary. But for someone to say that all of these things are misogynistic and for me to refute them doesn't necessarily mean sense up until I actually start to refute them point by point. So I'm going to do exactly just that. So the first one that he mentioned was daddy issues. First of all, daddy issues is not misogynistic at all. Actually, if anything, I would say that it absolves a lot of the accountability from a woman and whatever actions she might have, and basically throws it on the fact that maybe she didn't have a father to actually teach her better. That's exactly what daddy issues is. Whatever trauma she's had from not having a dad around, she basically gets to go around, do some dumb shit, and then society basically gets to defend her or just throw a blanket, whatever it is that she was doing, and choose the simplest explanation for why she did what she did, as she didn't have her father around, so she's had some issues from that. Yet she's a fully grown adult and she's responsible for her own actions, which is quite wild. Then you look at the second one, the nagging wife. That trope usually exists mostly because the wife does actually nag and doesn't give the man peace. You will almost never find a situation where a man is treated well at home and says that the wife is nagging. Like, if the guy is given his peace, if the guy is given his space and his peace of mind, you will rarely ever find that man saying that his wife is nagging. Then you look at the third one, which was the homewrecker. First of all, I can't even remember the last time I heard another man calling a woman a homewrecker. We don't even call men homewreckers. Do you want to know how wild that shit is? How many men refer to a woman as a homewrecker? Like, most of the people that are referring to other people as homewreckers is women calling other women homewreckers, and more often than not, actually, I'd even argue 90% of the time, the women that are classified as homewreckers know full well that the man is married, but are actively trying to be with the man and basically get the wife out of the spot that she's in so that they can take it. Thus the term homewrecker, because she is trying to break apart the family and the home. Then the whole term of her sleeping her way to the top, or she slept her way to the top, how many guys usually complain about that shit? Like, you can talk about it. Some guys might, talk about how some person is incompetent because she slept her way to the top. But the people that mostly talk about this are women. It is mostly women who will complain about another woman who slept her way to the top. Are we supposed to blame the guy at the top for doing that? Yeah, there's some blame that needs to be there. But when you think about it, if the woman didn't do it, then of course it's wrong. That's just throwing a trope to someone that you don't know what she did to get to where she was. You just assume that she's beautiful or she's shapely, and the only way she could have moved up is she gave up the pussy. But if she did do it, and you know that she did do it, then technically, one, it's true, she did sleep her way to the top. But on the other hand, it doesn't mean that the woman is bad, and we don't throw the blame to the woman, we throw the blame to the system, because it is a system that is rewarding giving up pussy. And that system will be made up of a couple of guys that want to let a babe climb up the ranks by simply giving them some pussy. So for the most part, this one, guys don't even complain as much about it. They kind of just look and they're like, you know what, she gave up the pussy, that's how she got up, and it sucks, but maybe if I'm in that position, I would give it to her, or maybe if I was in that position, I probably wouldn't. But that being said, the only one that I can argue is debatable is the single mom one, because it's tricky. You can be a single mom through a variety of different ways. You know, your partner can pass away. You could be with someone that was very loving, but something happened to them, and as such, you couldn't be with them. They could have ended up in prison. They could have ended up in a mental health facility. They could have abandoned you. And of course, none of those things are great, but there are some instances where a babe knows full well this nigga does not look like good father material or fatherhood material, but she still goes on ahead either to keep the guy or simply because she believes that she won't get rid of the kid, and she ends up becoming a single mom. So in that case, I would say that that trope does make sense to some degree, but it doesn't necessarily mean that every man uses that trope because they hate women. But you can say that it is mostly used as a way to give a cautionary tale. So in other words, when you kind of think about it, minus the fifth one, when you look at what this guy is saying, a lot of what he's doing is trying to take accountability away from the women, yet he claims that women have been taking accountability since day one. Truth of it is, that normally doesn't happen, and a lot of times, women will try to rewrite the story and rewrite the wording so that you can listen to their story and be like, you know what, she's been through a lot and she's not a bad person, or it's not all that bad because there was some issue here and there, or, you know, she had to do what she had to do. Like, people will be willing to give a lot of leniency to a woman who knows how to rewrite her story. Let me explain it like this. Just the same way you will hear prostitutes trying to reshape themselves and calling themselves commercial sex workers, you will hear a babe that was basically giving it up, going ahead and saying, you know what, back when I was younger, I used to date a lot, and a lot of those guys that I dated weren't all that great up until I met so and so and so. And then after that, after I felt like he broke my heart, I went back out there, and I've been in this season where I've just been openly dating as I try to find the next person that I want to be with. And just like that, Shorty basically told you that she used to fuck around back in the day. She dealt with a guy that gave her character development, and now she's chasing her whole phase, but she wants to phrase it nicely so that it doesn't sound so bad. And you tell me that women have been taking accountability from day one? I don't know. This shit doesn't seem right. Maybe to me, but this shit doesn't seem right. But all that saying, let me just conclude by saying that dude is being the male version of a pick-me, and none of his points hold water besides the whole single mom thing. To be quite honest, I wouldn't say that most of these points are misogynistic. They're mostly just tropes that are meant to shame women, but at no point in time has it been said that it is the men shaming women. Oftentimes, you will find that it is the women shaming women. And I do think that that's a truth that needs to be acknowledged. Although, then again, maybe I could be wrong about this, just the same I could be wrong about a bunch of other things in the episode. So either way, I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open on IG. It is at the Breaktime_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the Breaktime Podcast. On X, it is at Bagaka the D. And on Bluesky, it is at the BreaktimePod.bsky.social. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.
But what I believe is that if you put a pastor and a prostitute in one room, one is likely to convert the other.